You're listening to Second Cut. This is the weekly podcast from thefilmmagazine.com, where we talk about topics in film history, criticism, and theory, something like that. I'm Jacob, and I'm the one who went method for this episode.
I'm Sam. I'm the one who's just like Rodri, but thinking of getting my thumbs insured.
I'm Kieran. I'm the one remembering the good old days where Jacob had that intro absolutely down.
Wait, you mean at one time?
Yeah, exactly. The good old
It
days.
used to be different. I knew it.
Exactly. And then you managed to get it down to a formula, and you just started wandering off now. Are you changing the formula?
Yes.
Are we now going to 4 thumbs?
8.
Ooh.
Mark, who are you?
So anyway,
We have a special guest. Sorry. His name is Mark. He writes for the Film Magazine. That's him down there.
Thank you very much. I am Mark. I am the one who isn't usually here.
Or
That is
he?
true. Well, he's here in spirit, at least.
Yeah.
That explains why things keep falling over in the background.
So, Mark had a good idea for this episode, and
About 3 months ago.
yes, it was still 2023 back then, and Mark was like, "Hey, I'm gonna come on, but it's going to be the event of the season. You know, we basically been building to this like Avengers Endgame." Mark brought the idea of doing Siskel and Ebert, and what is the overarching plan of this episode?
Thank you very much. What a nice little intro you did for that. Because I like it as an idea, but it's nice to know you think so too.
Well,
But
mainly
basically-
I forgot the whole thing, so
well,
I'm just kidding, Mark.
How professional. So a few months ago, I came over to your guys and came up with the idea of doing a Siskel and Ebert episode, because as 4 writers for the same website and people who write in general, I thought it'd be really interesting to discuss film criticism. But considering I am such a massive fan of Siskel and Ebert, and I think it's safe to say that they are the 2 biggest film critics of all time, I thought it would be really interesting to cover specifically them and kind of go along with their style of reviews, their style of talking about movies. So basically, the idea for the episode today is to look at the review system, which was thumbs up or thumbs down, and discuss a film that falls within 4 different categories, which would be 2 thumbs down from both men, 1 thumbs down from just Siskel, 1 thumbs down from just Ebert, and then 2 thumbs up from both men as well. So within that, we are discussing Reservoir Dogs, Guilty by Suspicion, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and Martin Scorsese's After Hours as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
Martin Scorsese is also in Guilty by Suspicion.
Yeah.
By suspicion, yeah.
Which
With
I would
Robert
like
De
to
Niro.
say,
It's like, what?
I did not know that going in. So when he
Nope,
popped
neither
up,
did
I
I.
had the lovely surprise. And I really like Guilty by Suspicion, but I honestly think he's one of the best parts about it. I think he is so good in that film.
I think you do forget he is one of the very limited number of directors who can as a decent fist of acting as well. You know, someone who didn't start out as acting and kind of go transition into it. You know, I think he does a
And
decent
better
job in
than
that when he-
Tarantino.
Oh God! Don't talk about Tarantino and his Australian accent.
For his appearance in Sukiyaki West and Django. Although, can I quickly butt in for something completely unrelated? You said we all write for the Film Magazine, which will be up for another 6 years.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true.
We live.
I will be honest, Kieran, I thought you were about to drop an absolute bombshell on me and be like, you said we'll write for the Film Magazine. Guess what, Mark? You're fired. Sorry to break it to you this way.
I don't have that power.
We're going out with a bang, I suppose.
I don't have any power.
Sure. But
Yes.
So it seems quite fitting that we're alive for another 6 years and we're discussing, film critics, that group of film critics.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to call ourselves film critics?
I would say so.
Sure.
We can call ourselves whatever we want to.
Yeah. let's go around here. And Mark, you said you really love them. I mean, you're the guest. Talk a little bit about your first experiences with them and how many episodes of this TV show you've watched.
Oh, Jesus. Right. Okay.
Actually, no. Before that, Mark, tell us, who are Siskel and Ebert? Let's cover the basis.
Sure.
For those
That's a good
who
point.
haven't heard of.
Sure. So if there is anyone who's watching this podcast who is unaware of Siskel and Ebert, which frankly I would be a little surprised if you're listening to this and are not aware of who they are. They were
Oh, Sam's doing my job of pulling things off the bookshelf.
So Siskel and Ebert were two film critics, both from Chicago. One writing for the Chicago Tribune, which was Gene Siskel, and one writing for the Chicago Sun-Times, which was Roger Ebert, also a Pulitzer Prize winner for journalism. And essentially, through writing about film for their whole lives, they would eventually get a TV show together, which went through various different names, but most people just refer to it as Siskel and Ebert, or Siskel and Ebert at the Movies. And essentially, just for, I think it was just under 30 years, they discussed film on TV once a week, and they had a very famous rating system, which was thumbs up or thumbs down, with the whole purpose of telling audiences at home what films were worth spending their money on, whether that be to go to the cinema or to buy on VHS or other home media instruments, I suppose. But yeah, so basically just through that TV show, they became incredibly famous and incredibly influential. And not only did many people get into film criticism through them, but a lot of people found their reviews to be like the go-to reviews. And it became a big thing that if it said 2 thumbs up on a movie poster, you knew you had to go see it. So I think that pretty much sums up Siskel and Ebert, hopefully quickly. And as for myself, to say how many episodes I've watched really would be challenging. I've not really kept count, but it's quite high. I've watched a good chunk, I like to think. But yeah, it's funny because growing up, I've always loved film. It's always been my key, like my main hobby, my main love and passion. But it took me a while to get into criticism. And it was actually when the news broke that Roger Ebert had passed. I was still in high school, and my friends told me, and when I didn't know who he was at the time, they were like shocked that I was unaware. So since then, I went out of my way to read more of his reviews and to watch more of the show. And within that, they've just become 2 of my favorite critics ever, and I would say are a big reason why I write and a big reason why I love film and film criticism as much as I do. So yeah, they're a big influence on me, and I think as much as my writing style differs greatly from theirs, I think I very much take a lot of influence from their approach to writing as well.
It's quite interesting watching 1 or 2 of the episodes for this, and kind of because they discuss sort of 4 or 5 films that come out that week in each episode. And 1, they're very succinct. And 2, essentially, the show was kind of the first movie review podcast. Because pretty much all it was they'd show the odd clip that they were allowed. And then, like, it'd be maybe 3-4 minutes max, including the clip and a discussion and a giving a plot for each film. So you got like 2 minutes of review and a clip, and that was pretty much it. So there isn't actually that much difference from the early shows to essentially this, only we're not showing clips and we spend 20 times as long discussing the movies.
Yeah, that's what really stood out to me for my review. I'd never watched the show before, and you get to talk for like maybe 3 to 5 minutes max about something, but yeah, more than likely 2. So my YouTube video was divided up into the different movies. They did Godzilla, Fear and Loathing, something. I can't remember what else it was in my episode. And like, it's such a limited amount of time to give people that thumbs up or thumbs down. You really got to give some kind of hot take because it is TV. So, I'll get into what Ebert was saying for mine. He was the thumbs down, but they're getting through it so quickly. And like we talk about, we need to get through it faster, but it's like 3 to 5 times the amount of what they're doing at minimum. And that's something I do like about this kind of media format compared to that, is we get more of that long form, in-depth discussion relative to what were the biggest film critics doing on TV. And part of their success was surely that they were doing it in that quick rapid fire format that keeps people's attention, allows them to get through more stuff. It's a different method than like delivering the written reviews in print media. Like just being a part of that, seeing what it used to be like compared to now, where we have Rotten Tomatoes, and we used to talk about like, here's what it's rated on Rotten Tomatoes, but what does that mean? Why is it that way? Thumbs up, thumbs down is a binary, but like, and so is Rotten and whatever the other one is, Fresh, but
Fresh, yeah.
Yeah, it feels more like thumbs up and thumbs down tells you something that I think Rotten and Fresh doesn't, because one is an aggregate and one is someone directly telling you their individual opinion. And because there are so many voices, like the entire medium of film criticism has changed.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how they differ. So, for example, with Reservoir Dogs, the score that they give is slightly different when you go onto Ebert.com, which is set up by Ebert and is now carried on by a team of critics after him. There's also it's now out of 4 stars, even though they go to half, so it's split and things like that. But even that review that Ebert did print-wise for Reservoir Dogs, because they obviously did a TV version where they have to discuss it, but his regular job was to type it out, is a longer version. And it's interesting for me because, one of the things that you do get as well with different mediums is you have to give essentially different word counts. And that changes the style and how you write. But not only that, it also dictates kind of how much or how little you can write about things. So, for example, I can't remember what it was. I think it might have been Night Swim that came out at the beginning of the year. Warning, it's awful. And because I hated it so much, I genuinely wanted my review just to be, it's crap. That's it. Just a 2-word review, or don't watch it, or god awful, just something like that. But the trouble is, because it's now online, the format and you have to write it kind of dictates that you behind the scenes stuff, and I'm sure this is for other sites as well, that you kind of add a certain amount of word count to kind of algorithm changes to essentially make it more visible. So quite often for some of my reviews, I will be looking for a certain word count. I won't say the actual thing it is, and sometimes I'm having to find stuff to flesh out this review to help the algorithms out for these reviews, when in actual fact, I just want to write about 2 sentences going, it's god awful, everything's crap, don't watch it, and leave. Because I think that is a more punchy reflection of what I actually feel about the film.
With my writing, I tend to find the easiest and most enjoyable reviews to write are the ones where I feel either extreme, really. So either I absolutely hate something or I absolutely adore something, because you can wax lyrical, you can have a good old rant about it. But it's the ones in the middle, like the uninteresting films. There's just not enough to kind of keep your interest and just enough to talk out full stop. That kind of the ones that kind of struggle. I mean, these guys became famous for their rants and for their arguments with each other. When their opinions were diametrically opposed. I mean, I think Roger Ebert, especially, I think he was quite upfront saying he was the less comfortable one in front of the camera. Like his writing was his kind of his happy place, his comfort zone, and Siskel was a bit more polished, a bit more like loquacious and comfortable. I think Ebert sometimes he even also struggles to keep his opinions to a manageable soundbite kind of length. It wasn't really pithy. You can kind of see he just wants to carry on, really just get into it. And then you go to his site, you see like a 1,000-word review or whatever, and he's just getting into cultural, socio-cultural kind of history and all these other things it brings into it, you know.
But I think with the TV, what that medium does, and I mean with their written stuff as well, but you especially see it with the TV segments, is that they eventually managed to get it so that what was said was the important stuff, and what they said was accurate and precise, and it is kind of the precision of the writing, which is something I'm always trying to look for, cutting out kind of stuff which just feels like fluff, you know, and trying to make it not necessarily accurate, because sometimes you do have to over dramatize stuff for entertainment value. And actually, I will find in a minute. There's a list. Mark Kermode wrote in one of his books of 5 things for a successful film review. One of them was entertainment. It should be fun to read a review like this. But with the reduced time length, you have to be exact in what you're saying. And they eventually, and yes, there are times where they go off on rants. Mark Kermode is not immune to this. I think it's the film Entourage. You go on YouTube, there's a good 10-minute rant on Entourage. It's great. It's just how awful and just how like crass it is. But you know,
it's
Siskel and Ebert
on this, by the way. One day.
No, we're not. They managed to get it, and it's something that I'm always looking for as well. Is to be kind of what they're saying is kind of correct, you know, and not in a kind of I agree with them way, but the words are exactly what they want to say and how it should be said. It feels right. And it's that kind of specificity that is, I think, an important part of film criticism, and they nailed it.
That is one of my personal favorite things about, like, because I love their written reviews. Unfortunately, a lot of Siskel's written reviews aren't as widely available as Ebert's. But that's one of my favorite things about the TV show is, as you said, Kieran, their reviews are so precise. And I don't think there's ever been a time where I've watched one of the reviews and not understood exactly what they meant. Like, even if I don't agree with what they're saying, even if I don't agree with the actual review that they're giving, which I'm sure we're going to get into during this episode, it's one of those things where I always get their issue with the film, and I find it really impressive, because when you do read the reviews, even if it's much longer, the kind of skeleton of what they're talking about is the exact same as the TV show. They just are allowed to go more in depth. That's something I find fascinating about seeing those differences. And it's funny because very quickly, talking about word count, for example, everyone has said like it changes from film to film. Sometimes you have to fluff it up, sometimes you have to cut it down. It's difficult. But we obviously today we opened up a few questions for people to send in. And one that my friend had sent to me personally, he asked me what our favorite negative reviews were. And the one that I immediately point to that admittedly wasn't a professional review, it was on Letterboxd, was for Johnny Guitar, the like 1950s Western, in which my review was just, nah. That was the whole review. And I forgot I'd written it until my friend pointed it out to me.
Was this our favorite one of our reviews that we've ever?
Yes.
Oh, my answer was going to be my own, so perfect.
Mm-hmm. Please tell us, Jacob.
So I wrote a 2-part article about the movie. Oh gosh, what is it called now? It's a Christian film about baseball.
Of course it is.
I think it is Hitting Love and Catching Faith. Pitching Love and Catching Faith. You can watch the whole thing on YouTube, apparently. It stars a reality TV, well, now reality TV star. I don't remember if she was or not at the time. But, yeah, she's on a reality TV show and looks very different than she did in that movie. And I wrote a very long 2-part article about it. And, yeah, I would say it's more, you know, just eviscerating the film scene by scene than it is a review. But I enjoyed writing that.
That is impressive, I must admit.
I just had a quick look through my stuff, and I just found. I think we all know it's more fun to write a review where we rip the ever-loving hell into a movie than do anything else. So I just refound because I say them all, my Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 review. And I started off, I think this is also one of the ones where I wanted it to be just like 50 words. But algorithms and such, and we say the algorithms also. I guess if you're writing for traditional media, we have a certain length in the column, or whatever, that you have to read. So it's not just an online thing. But I started off roughly with this is the exact quote. This review will be shorter than the others because with this film, much like Cthulhu, there is a fear that the more you speak its name, the closer it gets. Which I will bring this up for comparison. It was completely inspired by a Roger Ebert review, which I think I've quoted before, which is the immortal beginning of his review for Pearl Harbor, which is possibly the greatest opening line I've ever seen in a review, which is Pearl Harbor is a 2-hour movie squeezed into 3 hours about how on December the 7th, 1941, the Japanese staged a surprise attack on an American love triangle, which is still my favorite line of any review ever. Just fact.
That's hilarious.
And yet somehow it still got 1.5 out of 4 stars.
That's impressive. Sam, do you have a favorite negative review of yours?
Or positive? We'll go for negative.
Yes,
it was a 5.
I try to be too negative as a rule. I do try and look for light and darkness, but I've just brought up one now that I remember off the top of my head. During the COVID lockdown, Sam Levinson released Malcolm and Marie with John Dave Washington and Zendaya. This little intimate kind of couples drama in black and white, and made of a skeleton crew and undercover restrictions and everything. Wasn't impressed with it. I gave it 7 out of 24, I think.
That's your equivalent of giving it a 6.
Yeah, it's just it wasn't for me at all. But yeah, I picked up. I thought, how do I wrap this up? And then I ended it with this line. We may all be starved of good company at the moment, but even in our desperation for human connection, you'll be asking for the evening you wasted with this couple back. So, yeah.
That's good.
I mean, one thing I will say, because someone like Roger Ebert, I discovered him at uni. I think really I was vaguely aware of him beforehand, but I really got into like film criticism and reading around the subject, obviously, while studying film at uni, and he I think he had a quote. This is what kind of makes me feel, but he had a quote about this. It's like a good film critic should, even if you disagree with them, it should encourage you to read around, not just always go for your favorite critic every time, but read a few differing opinions. He's got like a better kind of a wide kind of view of the subjects, and I think that kind of as you were saying, Mark, you always got what he was getting at, even if you had a different opinion on it. I don't think it was very rarely unfair or kind of like lazy in terms of what he was kind of criticizing. I think he was coming from a genuine place, and yeah, I disagree with a lot of his reviews, but yeah, as I said, they're always entertaining to read, and it encouraged me to think about outside the box, really, and just look for differing opinions to my own, to increase my enjoyment of the art form, So you did have a talent for that.
That's one of my favorite things about film criticism, is you can have your favorite critic, whether that be like Ella Kemp, Hannah Strong, Roger Ebert, any of us. But it's one of those things where regardless of who you like or how much you read the reviews, like, there's always going to be some you disagree with. And it encourages you to read more, not to find people that would agree with yourself or that fit your own views, but just to find how other people are feeling about this movie and to essentially have this one little discussion in your own world about this film, because we all love talking about movies, but sometimes it's not as readily available to have a conversation with someone because either they've not seen the movie or they're not available or whatever. So if you read these reviews, pardon me, if you read these reviews, similar to a podcast, it's almost like you're in the conversation. And I think with that, speaking about the reviews and difference of opinions, perhaps we should get started with our first film of the day. which is
Yeah,
a film-
are we going by thumb orientation or are we going by year released?
Just somebody
So,
yell one out. and
we're
start.
going by thumb orientation. So we're going to do the 2 thumbs down first, which is Reservoir Dogs, and then we'll do 1 thumb up Siskel, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, 1 thumb up Ebert, Guilty by Suspicion, and then 2 thumbs up After Hours. Yes.
Nice. Well, and I think that we pretty much only picked ones from like the late 80s to the late 90s.
Yeah.
So,
And they're all
was
American films, you know.
Yeah, it was a very narrow kind of window.
But-
in
I mean,
It's-
to a
it's-
certain extent, we're picking ones that they reviewed, and most of the time they weren't doing retrоспectives. So if they start going real, properly in sort of the 70s,
I mean,
and
I was trying to. I was looking down and just seeing if we'd kind of looked out on like a general kind of themed style for films together. And the only one I've come across is guys having an absolutely terrible time.
that's a good point.
And what? That's a really good point.
White
Sam.
straight males.
We're changing the name of this episode.
Yeah. White straight males get done over by
Yeah.
white straight male directors.
Well, I forgot mine was from the late 90s because the movie takes place in the 70s and it looks like people in the 90s
Yeah.
tried to dress like the 70s, and so there is the a sort of, to my episode, I guess they'd really gotten that formula down a year before Siskel died, and like, you know, the other 3 basically right in the prime of the show, which stretched so far. But like, it's such a cool cultural artifact to see the movies being reviewed with that silly theme song and video, and it's so good.
So kind of 70s, 80s, like
Yeah.
really.
The music's
cheesy.
hilarious.
In the nicest way. It's music and graphics that could only have come from the US.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
It
yes.
It like the intro music and the graphics now would have been done for like a 90s workout VHS tape.
Yeah, or
Like-
someone's going to tell you the dangers of drugs. Yeah, it's... speaking of
Hey,
the
man.
dangers of drugs, Kieran, tell us about Reservoir Dogs.
I mean, there's diamonds in it.
Yeah, not really sure about the connection with drugs. But anyway, go
Yeah,
on,
the
Kieran.
drugs come for yours.
Oh, Kieran's a long-haired hippie.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, and probably the one out of Motionless that's not done the drugs. Anyway. Anyway, Mark's got long hair as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, he doesn't seem like a
So,
hippie.
Yeah,
I'm wearing a
Reservoir
sweater.
Dogs.
I seem respectable.
Who like at this point hasn't at least heard of Reservoir Dogs? It's Tarantino's first movie. I think it was originally done through like a load of Sundance, because Sundance at that point had like a writer's workshop kind of thing, and this was the one going around. And apparently, even before it was being made, like everyone was hyping up this script, and then Tarantino gave it to like somebody who knew, who ran like a drama school, who got it to Harvey Keitel. Harvey Keitel liked the script so much that he put some money in, which helped it get like the crew and the backing, the financiers. And a lot of these people, it's quite interesting to see that they would only later become names. You know, people like Tim Roth and who else is in it?
Steve Buscemi was.
That's the
it
one I'm
feels
thinking
like
of. Yeah,
he was
Steve
kind of big
Buscemi,
at the
yeah.
time.
Like they would eventually kind of, and Samuel L. Jackson has like a cameo role like before like Pulp Fiction, you know, properly does it, and Michael Madsen as well, which is why I think is it actually canon that John Travolta's character in Pulp Fiction is actually related to them?
Yeah.
Is it canon, or is it just like, oh, we have the
It
same
is
name
canon.
for a laugh?
It's no.
I thought in theory all of Tarantino's films took place.
Oh,
in
the
same year.
Cineverse, yeah.
Yeah, like it's never ever been a thing that he's been like, by the way, but it's heavily theorized, and I think if you would like it to be true, then it's true. But
What wasn't he writing a Vega brother film script that didn't get made?
That is true, but at the same time, it never got made.
But yeah,
So, you know
but
what I
if
mean?
he's trying to create that in the real world, I think
I
that is
know, but,
close
like,
enough to confirmation.
Like it is, but It isn't.
It's a fictional story. Nobody is actually related. It doesn't matter. That's as close as we get to it. I would say that's good enough.
So, Reservoir Dogs. It is a load of guys that carry out a heist that you never actually see, and the heist has gone wrong. And one of the reasons for that is because he didn't have the money to do an actual heist. This is a independent first movie. Like, nobody has this money, so he deliberately did it. So it's essentially about everything that happens aside from the heist, and it's a load of people trying to work out what the hell went wrong and who kind of tipped the police off that they were going to be there. And a lot of flashbacks to different characters and all, it's weird because I think we think of Reservoir Dogs as essentially being the warehouse and everyone's in the warehouse. And then like half the movie has nothing to do with the warehouse that they're in. It's all flashbacks and stuff. And there's a good 10-minute start about 6 guys debating Madonna lyrics and tips for no reason at all, as far as I can work out. I mean, now it's considered, very popular, very influential, even if it's just the shot of the 2 guys like that. And it's got all the Tarantino trademarks. So, it's got the dialogue that goes on for too long. It's got the kind of non-linear storytelling. It's got the references to other movies because, as I've always said, watch every other movie in existence. You've seen all of Tarantino's movies. So, for example, all the characters have different names. Mr. Pink, Mr. Blue, Mr. Orange, like that. And that's taken from the 1974 film, The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, which is great and has a really good ending. Genuinely good movie. So it's got all the stuff in it. And it's funny watching Siskel and Ebert's review because they don't actually say it's a bad movie. What they say is they're going, I can see what he's going for. Tarantino has style. He has talent. But their argument was that essentially it's kind of like a gag where by 15 minutes in, you've kind of got the joke. And then the movie just keeps going. And it's like nothing really changes. And they were kind of commenting that kind of Tarantino's more, I think in the written review that Ebert did, he said essentially Tarantino had an idea and ran with it and hoped that idea would keep the film going for 100 minutes. And their argument on the show and things like that is that, there's a lot of style, there's a lot of substance, it's very violent, it's kind of fun. But that's all it is. They were going, it's too much style. We don't get enough of the characters. We don't get enough of all these kind of, the nuances, I think, that would elevate a film. So I'd probably guess they're sort of, if they had like a 50% kind of horizontal thing, they'd have probably given that. And then you see a lot of the kind of comments on YouTube, because somebody clipped it out, obviously, because it's Reservoir Dogs, and put it on YouTube, just that bit, although the full episode's there as well. And everyone's comments are going, oh, I disagree with it because it's, and you'll get things like the dialogue's cool, the violence is cool, everything's really cool. And they're going, and I'm there going, that's their point. All these things that everyone says is cool, they go, yeah, that's great, but there's nothing else. And I think, yeah.
I think historically they both had a real issue with what they kind of thought was like senseless violence, violence for violence sake, which is why like Ebert especially had such a problem with all like the slasher movies, because he just said this is just happening. Like, what's the point of all this? What does it mean anything, or is it just because you can do it? They've done it,
Well, and I find it particularly interesting because, to be honest, when Kieran, when you suggested this film as the 2 thumbs down movie, I was unaware at that point that they had given it 2 thumbs down. Like I was certain they'd reviewed it, but I didn't know what they'd given it. So going into the review, based off of the special episode they did in the 80s against slashers and violence against women, where not only did they think it was senseless violence and they didn't think it added much to movies, but they actually thought it was damaging for viewers. Going into this, I was like, these guys they're gonna hate this. Like, they're gonna think it's too violent. They're going to think that it's gonna be damaging to viewers and stuff. And I thought it was really interesting because Roger Ebert even mentions the violence in the film, like just kind of offhand. He kind of says it's a very violent movie, but he doesn't particularly say there's an issue with that. Like, neither of them seem to have an issue with the violence or think that it would be damaging, or to be honest, they don't I don't really get the idea that they think it's entirely senseless, but it's really interesting that the views seem to have changed somewhat towards violence
Yeah,
for
I
them
think
by that point.
Well, I think one way to describe that, maybe, I have a professor who was a little bit older for a film class, and he said he hates Brian De Palma because he's base. Like when you're looking at De Palma versus, like, I guess, of course, I don't know, maybe he's comparing him to,
Sergio
like,
Hitchcock or Coppola,
yeah, or Murnau. Like, I don't know who he's comparing him to, but he's like, it's just base, and I'm like, I mean, I guess, but I like violence in movies. It's fine if it's really well done. It doesn't matter that there's some sort of instinctual, a human nature thing to it. If it has meaning to the film, if there's reason for it. And with Tarantino, I don't think it's just violence for violence sake. He loves all the 70s exploitation films. It was like, what if I take that to 100?
Yeah. And in the review, it's interesting because they're talking about the fact that it is playing a lot on I think they described it as essentially showing you what all the crime films don't show you, which is the kind of the aftermath, the idea that kind of none of them are incredibly clever, all the stupid conversations that we have that you would not have in these crime movies. But their kind of thing was that, it's kind of well done, but it's all surface level. There's nothing underneath it. I think they described it as kind of empty underneath. After 15 minutes, you keep expecting it to go somewhere different, and it doesn't. They do not say that Tarantino isn't talented, and I think, in fact, the written review, the opening line is, now that we know Quentin Tarantino can make a movie like Reservoir Dogs, it's time for him to move on and make a better one. So it's not like they're going, it's a bad movie. And I think a lot of our kind of comments is also, we now have an understanding of what Tarantino has done in the future. We've all seen Pulp Fiction, we've all seen Kill Bill, we know Tarantino. This was just a guy that made a movie, like who'd worked in a video rental store couple of years before and has managed to get some movie together with a couple of some named actors that he's in. And so we have this kind of retrospective understanding rather than almost just seeing it as a film itself. We kind of come to it through the eyes of, this is a Quentin Tarantino film, which is immediately going to change our perspective of it. A bit like going to watch a Hitchcock film. Oh, this is a Hitchcock film. You almost have, even if you don't want to, I think there's a kind of auteur glasses going on. Even if we discount auteur theory, there's a thing where we go, oh, it's a Tarantino film. Whereas this was before Tarantino, even though it was his first, which means that they are going to view it purely on the film itself, rather than this is a Tarantino film. They're not looking at the tropes of his kind of things. And when you view it from that point, a lot of their comments do make sense, that it is, let's be honest, an awful lot of dialogue that means absolutely nothing for a plot. There's a good 10-minute conversation about giving tips and not giving tips and the ethics of it. There's just nothing for the plot. And realistically, nothing for the characters that you can't get otherwise from the rest of the story. And Quentin Tarantino talking about the hidden metaphors and Madonna lyrics. Realistically, that has nothing to do with the rest of the film. You could cut that entire bit off and it'd do nothing. It just shows all the gangsters beforehand, before they go and do the thing. So I appreciate a lot of their comments, and the comments do actually make sense for the time they're in. I think opinions now are going to change with kind of retrospective looking back on it. But and again, the written review, we said they're giving 2 thumbs down. Then the written review, I don't know when that episode went out, but according to the website, Ebert's written review was from October 26, 1992, so it's the same year, and that's 2.5 out of 4 stars and a thumbs up. So it was, even for them, very on the borderline of thumbs up, thumbs down. And this is where I'm kind of going, this is probably an issue with their thumbs up, thumbs down system, that it's completely binary and doesn't accurately represent how good a movie is. It's just whether you should go see it this instant or not at all, because a movie that has a lot of merits but doesn't quite get that looks exactly the same as the worst movie of all time. And a movie which is decent to go see for a night out looks like the best movie of all time. So it's an interesting one. I think Reservoir Dogs highlights that quite nicely and quite well.
It's interesting hearing you say all that, because I think your point about how a thumbs down looks the exact same as the worst movie ever made, because that would also get a thumbs down, and vice versa with the best film ever made. And I think that's a really good point. I do think there is something to be said about the lack of middle thumb, essentially.
Yeah.
Because I think, to me, it's always that thing, because as much as written review gives it 2.5 out of 4 and a thumbs up, to me it's kind of like, this kid is talented, let's see where it goes. And obviously his review actually says that. But then on TV it's kind of like, he's like, yeah, he's talented and we'll see where he goes, but like this, I'm not really sure I'd recommend it, like, to pay for it, which I think is quite reasonable. And I think it's nice because you can read quite a lot into it at the same time. But it's funny because as for their comments on the show, I was a teenage boy once. I loved and continue to love Reservoir Dogs. And it's interesting because speaking about the pointless dialogue, it's funny because with a lot of his movies, I think there is a lot of that layered throughout, where there would be those conversations about like Madonna, True Blue, Like a Virgin, throughout the film. But it's funny because the more I think about Reservoir Dogs, the more I think that the beginning has that, where it has the Like a Virgin, not Like a Virgin, Like a Virgin. I was thinking of the Triple J radio show there, pardon me. But yeah, they have Like a Virgin, that whole conversation, and the one about tipping, and it is pointless, and it just points out like these random little intricacies about the character that don't really come back later, but it's just a nice little thing. But it's funny because the rest of the film, I actually think the dialogue is like insanely important to the rest of the film and the characters, and that it's like, even like the random commode story, for example, as much as it's heavily stylized and as much as it doesn't sound like dialogue at that point that we would have really heard before, and to an extent still don't really hear as much other than from Tarantino, it's one of those things where you listen to it and you're like, oh, this is like an entire like the entire point to this is about his believability as an undercover cop, showing us how he was even able to get into the position he was in now, as well as to get the trust of I say Larry, Mr. White, and stuff like that. So it's really interesting because I think it parades itself as, I don't want to say pointless, but it parades itself as inconsequential. But in actual fact, I actually think that a lot of the dialogue comes back in quite a deep way and tells us a lot about the characters, the situation. So as much as I appreciate what they were saying, and I appreciate why to some people it would seem that way, I think for me it's a film that does have a lot of substance. It's so stylized sometimes it could maybe be easy to get lost, I think.
And I think the final comment before we should move on, before we just keep going on Reservoir Dogs, they pointed out the scene with stuck in the middle with the ear, and they kind of pointed at that and go, yes, it's horribly violent and everything like that, but it's a very good scene and it shows us things. And they were going, I wish it would show us more, rather than having this dialogue that just kind of says, and the dialogue is great and it sounds great and it sounds very Tarantino obviously now, but there are points like there's, when they get into the warehouse where you get Steve Buscemi and Harvey Keitel, that conversation goes on for about 10-15 minutes, and in the nicest way. There's no universe where that can't be cut down by 5 minutes and have exactly the same conversation. So it's not like the dialogue is bad, but there are points where it kind of says the same thing over and over again. You're driving the point home. You're not really learning more. It's just more style now onto the substance.
The problem with Tarantino dialogue is, it crackles, it's very memorable, but God, he's pleased with himself, isn't he? Look at me, look at all these lines I've come up with, aren't I clever?
Well, I think of it like I'd prefer Seinfeld dialogue to, we're basically talking about the plot. I just think that as a style is preferable. I'd rather there be, maybe not, because they're all they're not all the same because their opinions differ, but everybody talks in a very witty way. They all kind of have the same demeanor to them in that sense. So I still prefer it to just, so where are we going? just
I mean,
kind of normal
I'll take
conversation.
this over Mumblecore any day of the year. But at the same time, I think, I mean, I do like Reservoir Dogs. To finish up with my opinion on it, I do like Reservoir Dogs. But at the same time, I also think it's unpolished. Obviously, this is his first film; he's yet to get it. And I also think that the fact there is so much style here, and he hasn't quite got the kind of proper subtext of the meaning and the point of this film. It is an exercise in style. Let's be fair. But I think it's also an exercise in style that thinks it's cleverer than it actually is. It's very nice style, but once you understand, like, it's just crime, like, tropes, and there is nothing underneath that, suddenly there's a bit that drops. I think once you understand that the wow is just wow, there's nothing else. If that makes sense.
I get what you're saying. Yeah,
I enjoy the wow, and I enjoy the style. And if somebody shows a clip for it, Reservoir Dogs, lol. But there's nothing underneath it. There's no deeper meaning of the human existence or anything like that.
Yeah, hence it's somewhere between here and here, somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, Sam. We ain't doing in betweens. So everybody, I would like to ask, thumbs up or thumbs down?
Oh, I spoiled it.
I mean, I'm gonna be like
There's no
60%?
thumb in the middle. There's no thumb in the middle.
No thumb in the middle.
Okay,
Up or
okay.
down?
No
We'll give it
review
a
once.
Okay, 4 thumbs up.
But I agree with
this.
this 2.5 out of 4 stars.
So,
Still Ebert, we can still use it anyway.
Fair. So speaking of thumbs up, let's move on to our next movie, which is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas,
Yes.
which Gene Siskel gave his thumb up to, in which Roger Ebert didn't quite do the same. So Jacob, please tell us about your choice, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Well,
your trip.
I flashed up on the screen there Roger Ebert's it's just a collection of film reviews after 2006. A horrible experience of unbearable length, more movies that suck. And it's just a bunch of bad movie reviews.
I've got the first volume of that. I've not got the second.
I have the second and not the first. So, genius marketer. We should all be putting our reviews together in a book to sell. But yeah, so for that's why I picked the thumbs down from Ebert. I was like, oh, I'll listen to him eviscerate a film, and he did not. I had never seen Fear and Loathing before, so that is why I picked it. And I wanted to see what he would say about it, and unfortunately, I just disagreed with everything he said completely. Whereas Siskel's thumbs up, I was like, oh, interesting. This makes more sense. So, in case you don't know, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is about Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro playing Hunter S. Thompson's fictionalized version, fictionalized version of himself, and his overweight
semi-autobiographical version.
Yes, gonzo journalism. We'll just say that his Samoan attorney, who he refers to as my attorney, played by Benicio del Toro, who's playing a Mexican like activist lawyer, and they're just going on a drug-fueled romp through Vegas. In the movie, I'm not quite sure what they're doing, but I do know the background of it, which is Hunter S. Thompson met the real-life lawyer, whose name I forget. He met him while writing an article about the treatment of Hispanic people in Los Angeles, and they were like, well, we can't meet for this interview because of the racial tensions. We got to get out of town. They go to Las Vegas, and, you know, they just do a lot of drugs, and... You know, so what Hunter S. Thompson was supposed to be doing was writing a 250-word blurb about a photo for this Mint 400 dirt bike competition. So that is why he got an entire hotel suite, was for that. And yeah, doesn't do anything for it and gets a whole book out of it. So... I think
it's quite funny. Just saying, I hadn't seen this or read the book. I know the writing PhD student hadn't read a book, but it actually pretty much had, because being the heavy metal fan than I am. I didn't realize that the Avenged Sevenfold song "Backcountry" was based on the book and the film, using quotes from it, and the music video is just them recreating like the
Yep.
scenes. So as soon as I saw them driving down and waving the stick around kind of thing, and they got the quote at the start, I'm like, oh my god, I have seen this like film for like 16, 17 years of my life, and not actually realized that I'd seen the film before.
Yeah, as soon as the quote pops up at the beginning, I also had that realization, and it just kept happening over and over.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning he's going, "This is bat country," and he's waving at the bats he's hallucinating.
Oh my god!
So for my episode, Gene, this is 1998, the year before he died. Although it was late in the year, so it was actually just a few months before. Gene was on a call after surgery, and they just flash up a picture of him whenever he talks. So like whenever Kieran's internet goes out, I will be replacing him with a picture. That's been my plan. It sits right here in my stream stuff. And
My
I'm glad
internet
to
has
know.
been fine recently.
It has been,
Time.
but I have it prepared just in case. And it turns out I'm just taking tools that have been used by the masters. You know, they were doing that on live TV to make up for somebody not being able to be there.
They were actually doing a cross-country podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are nothing new.
So Roger Ebert was by himself in the studio, and so he was kind of doing all of the presenting. I don't know if Siskel did presenting in older episodes, but Ebert was doing all of it in the studio. And one of the first points he makes was the positives about the movie. He said it has good visuals. I think good visuals of a drug-fried brain. I couldn't tell if he was qualifying if you have a drug-fried brain, but I think he meant good visuals of that.
To be fair, I think that could apply to most of Terry Gilliam's filmography. Good visuals of a drug-fried brain.
Yes.
Yes.
And so what he was saying, that he liked the visuals of it, which are really extreme. I think that for where they were in the 90s, there's some pretty good what surely were computer graphic or generated effects. So that part I understood, because I also thought the visuals were good. But he goes on to say it's about the trip in the book. It's about going to Las Vegas in the book, but in the movie it tries to be the trip, which I completely disagree, like in terms of that being a bad thing. So Roger Ebert's point was that and he says this in the review that he wrote too, I would rather hear about somebody being drunk or a story about somebody on drugs than actually see it. Seeing the trip is not good. And I was like, how is that not better? How do you not want an experiential version of the book?
I will raise one kind of slightly kind of dark point in that Roger Ebert was a recovering alcoholic, and possibly didn't want the flashbacks to those the worst of his time. So maybe
he was not having drug trip feelings on his alcohol. They're very different experiences.
I have to say, Jacob, it's very funny hearing you say these things and disagreeing with them, because I very much agreed with Ebert's points. So, truth be told, I'm a big fan of the book, and I had seen this movie before 2013 or something, a long time ago. So watching it back, I was actually quite excited to do it because it had been so long. But I almost completely agree with Ebert's points. Because his point, he was like, I tried to figure out why I liked the book and didn't like the movie. And I think it's that thing where if I were to get drunk with a couple of friends, I would have a very good time with them. We'd all have a good time being drunk together and just being in that strange state of mind as like a cohesive unit. Whereas and I've sadly been in this position, if I were to sit with one or two drunk friends as they tell me about this thing that they think is wicked and I do not think is all that cool, but they're like, no, you had to be there. Yeah. I find it insufferable. I think it is one of the biggest wastes of my time, and I find it so
Well,
frustrating
I
because
think
it's one of
I think what
like,
you're
because they
saying
just
there.
don't get why you don't find it funny or why you don't find it cool. And it's like, dude, the reason you find it funny is because you were steaming. Like,
So-
and I'm completely sober.
What you're describing is if Johnny Depp as Hunter S. Thompson was sitting on a couch high telling you about the movie. But the movie itself is you are there. It's not you had to be there.
So that's where I agree with Ebert, because in the book you get to read what's going on, and you get to read it from Hunter S. Thompson's perspective. So although you're reading all of these crazy things, you kind of come at it from your own worldview and your own experiences, whether those own experiences be very similar to Hunter S. Thompson or whether they be very different. But regardless, you get to truly understand how crazy it is, I think. But in the movie, I think it tries to put you in his shoes. And to me, it just, by putting you in his shoes, I found myself the whole time, I was like, I don't think this is fun. I was like, I don't think it's very funny. I found it to be kind of like gross and disgusting. And my friend did raise a point, because I spoke to him because he adores the film and the book. He was like, oh, if you found the film to be gross and disgusting and like not easy to look at, he's like, technically that means it did its job. And I'm like, yes, but I think it meant it wasn't a good viewing experience, which I think obviously is the big takeaway. But I also think Terry Gilliam as a filmmaker, I have a lot of respect for him, especially for his work in Monty Python. But I think as a filmmaker, visually, sometimes he can push things a little too far for my tastes. And I think there's other directors that do similar things and create similar movies to Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, where they create that atmosphere and that feeling, such as Trainspotting, for example, where it really works. But for me, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas just does not.
Well, but with Trainspotting, I mean, it's a very different drug experience.
No,
like
I do appreciate that. Yeah, I do appreciate that.
If you're going to make a movie about people who are on LSD, if you're going to do it about the trip, let's say you make it like the movie The Hangover, right? Then you're watching someone who is high on shrooms or LSD or whatever. They're very high, but you're just watching it from this outsider perspective where they're doing the stupid things, where the movie is telling you about the trip. You know, I think that's one way. If you're going to adapt the film, there's that way, or there's the Terry Gilliam way, where he makes it extreme. He puts you into that experience as much as possible. And I think of those two options, the latter is the better for a film, the better visual option, because film isn't a medium where you sit and watch stupid people be stupid, but then if you can't see what they're experiencing, you're just going, well, this guy is completely sober and yelling at his lawyer about having a child drug sex slave. It's unclear what she draws paintings of Barbara Streisand. Like you read it described and then you picture what is happening. It's two people standing there high on drugs, much like we are now, minus the being on drugs, talking to each other. And that is so much more boring than that happening with crazy lights and while it's moving.
No.
Because
I'm
there's
just sat here going, me and Sam are literally watching an episode of Siskel and Ebert.
Okay. Well, let me come in as a third voice.
Voice of reason, Sam.
I would describe it as a comedy requiem for a dream, or
Yeah.
maybe Requiem for a Dream is a dramatic film in Las Vegas that came after, because both films
Depressing version of film.
Yeah. They go for like a very it's like the extreme drug trip, isn't it? It's like whereas Trainspotting is like about, you know, evoking like the high, you know, when things are really good, and the absolute low when things are at its worst. It's non-stop. Just a terrible time everyone's having, and the only time they're only not having a terrible time is when they don't understand what's happening and they're just too bewildered to realize what's going on. And I think like what Gilliam does with kind of the visuals and the soundscape and everything just kind of mixes together to it's kind of evoke that for me quite effectively.
I mean,
You know what I want to say. You know what I want to say. Sorry.
I think this comes down to the reproduction theory of film versus
well, that's the thing. What I will say is I totally get why Terry Gilliam took why he took it the way he did. Of course, if you're making a film version of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, you kind of have to recreate it through Hunter S. Thompson's eyes. I totally get that. It's just something where, for me, I think he takes it too far, and for me, that is not a brain I want to be inside. And for me, I find it much more maybe not much more of one thing, much less disgusting, much less disturbing.
Mark, would you say that, yeah, it's a brain you don't want to be inside, but for a film creating that brain you don't want to be inside, is it effective?
I think it's effective, but even though they're very different. So like Requiem for a Dream, it recreates their experiences on drugs. And as much as you're not sitting there being like, I completely get why someone would be addicted to heroin, I think it's very much a thing where Trainspotting, Requiem for a Dream, you're like, it's putting me inside their brain where this seems like a good idea, a good trip, a good experience. Whereas Fear and Loathing Las Vegas, it puts me inside his brain. I'm like, none of this seems like a great idea. And of course, that says a lot about Hunter S. Thompson. One other quick thing I want to say, which I maybe should have started with because it's a very tiny little thing. As a big fan of the book, I also think Benicio del Toro is incredibly miscast. Whenever I read the book, he is not the guy that I picture as the attorney. Quick little thing, pardon me.
As somebody that's never read the book, I'm judging this purely as a film.
Okay.
So not related to the book at all. I'm imagining the book doesn't exist because I've never read it. Therefore, I can't bring that into my account.
I'm very curious about this insight. This is
I want to know how closely the plot matches the plot of the book, as in kind of the events. Are the events similar in the similar order, or is there like a massive ending change or something like that? The reason I asked this is because the presentation that I get from the film, purely as a film, and that's the only thing I can judge, is that, you know, it's surreal, and I love the surreal stuff, and it's wild and mad and stuff like that. But the level of the madness, kind of after 20 minutes, I don't think really increases or decreases that much. And it's just a level of madness all the way through, which for me means that, yeah, it looks great. It's random stuff and, you know, it's surreal and dialogue and all this stuff. But the level doesn't change, which means my interest wanes as it goes on. And by an hour and hour, nothing much has changed, and I'm bored out of my mind going, come on, do something.
I completely agree with that. That's the main weakness, that it's one level, there's no kind of variation, nothing to kind of keep your interest peaks. And whereas, again, compare it to Trainspotting and even Requiem for a Dream, it's that mastery of tone, you know, to evoke kind of those kind of experiences, you know, when you're on drugs. I don't think Gillian quite gets. I'm not sure if the tone's just right. You know, visually works for me. Kind of, for me, it's a fun enough experience. But I want more. It's not one I go back to regularly because it's just not. It's just a bit samey. You know, if you're just sticking to that one kind of.
They're on hallucinogens the whole time, so there is this, you know, there's the cycle to heroin or cocaine or whatever, where it's up down, whereas with psychedelics, from what I've read and heard, you sort of hit a peak and you are just there until gradually your interest begins to wane. And Mark, I also have not read the book, but in the film they describe at the very beginning just how much LSD and mescaline they have. And then throughout the whole thing, they are taking mescaline and LSD the entire time. So I will argue that if I mean, story-wise, there probably should be more ups and downs than just, by the way, that's my dog.
Or lop half an hour off the movie.
Yeah, it does run a little long.
It's 2 hours long. It does not need to be 2 hours long.
I hard agree. that's the other thing, actually, for me. Going back to our friendly discussion, Jacob, is that
Called a row.
obviously I appreciate why for some. I totally appreciate why for some this works. I really do. It is like, I think if it works for you, it works for you. But for me, I do think Terry Gilliam pushed it a little too far. And as I said, I don't really like that it puts us inside of his, like, I don't really like that it shows us his perspective. Once again, I appreciate why that is the decision that was made. But I think for me, when you read the book, it's insane to the point that you're like, oh my God, this stuff is so mad. I can't believe it actually happened. Like, even though it's crazy, whenever I read the book, there's no point where I think, oh, that didn't happen. That's not true. He's fibbing. Like, every single sentence and word that is written by Hunter S. Thompson, I believe that at least that is how he experienced it. In the movie, I think, to be honest, you could say this comes down to the issue of adapting this book in the first place. But I think in the movie, when you watch it, at least for me, it's so crazy and it's presented in such an extreme way that the whole time I'm like, that didn't happen. That doesn't seem like something that would actually happen. This feels completely fictional, to the point that, to be honest, like, to the point that it kind of feels like people like goofing around in costume in front of a camera. Like, it just feels like play pretend rather than an actual adaptation of a great piece of work.
You say
the whole, like, honestly, man, the whole thing. I think like, I know it's based on something real. But the film presents it in such a ludicrous way that it just doesn't come across as such.
And yet,
and
I think like, exactly the opposite. I don't think it went far enough. And that
really?
I don't think it went far enough based on the level that it started out at.
Oh, okay.
Because it started out as something and doesn't go up from there. Where, and I've said this before in reviews on things. I think actually my most recent one of Destroy All Humans, I think it was. I done it for Bullet Train. That was the first one I thought of, where you kind of, when movies go, oh my God, it's absolutely insane. I go, is it really that stupid? You've got an idea and you've run with it. What you with the level it started out at, you either needed to start lower and build up. And I know it's meant to be, as Jacob said, there's hallucinogens, you just run and run and run. But I'm also in a movie theater, theoretically, at the time. Like, obey something with the movie theater and entertain me and something like that, because this is meant to be entertainment, blah, blah, blah. If you're going to, you either start on a smaller level and build up to the level which you get by the end, or if you start like this, have like the world imploding by the end of it. Just throw all the rules out the goddamn window. Literally every rule you can think of. That's the only way you can go. Because otherwise you just have this level that just rests. And as much as you keep that level, my interest in it starts to go down. And it's the level of, I'm not saying that it's not stupidly mad and over the top, but you get used to the level of stupidly mad so much that by 13, 14 minutes in, it's not stupid at all. It's the norm of the film. And to keep it engaging, you have to keep changing that up. You have to keep upping the stakes, or completely reversing it, or completely drop. You have to do something with it. And it's the fact that it doesn't do anything with that tone, which annoys me about this film. It's honestly very well made, but that got me.
Honestly, Kieran, terrific point. I think a film adaptation of Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas should not feel boring. And to me, it felt boring.
Yeah, I think, I'm hearing, Kieran, you use the word up. There's the point where it goes down. Whenever he takes the adrenochrome, the whole room turns red. He has the towel over his head. He's freaking out. And so, it's just the things that are happening. So, yeah, there's level to it. Either you know, you wanted more to happen. I was just like, okay, where is this actually going? What is he going to do his job? Well, he doesn't do his job.
It doesn't go anywhere.
But
that's the thing.
I think
nothing happens. It's just stuff thrown on the screen, and eventually he goes home.
I think that is kind of the point, though, because the larger idea, the interpretations that I've read of the story is it's about the American dream, the failure of like that countercultural hippie movement.
Siskel did try to argue that. I'm like, yeah, but don't bore me with it.
Yeah, they have the high energy of that era, and then they lost it and never achieved what they set out to achieve.
You know what? I think we're never going to agree on this.
True. One last thing.
And I think very appropriate we'll be split down the middle on this one.
Yeah. But yeah, one last thing. Obviously, like, I totally agree with that. Like, that is what this is about, Jacob, the point you made about the American dream. I just think it's much more interesting in the book than it is in the movie. So before we continue,
real quick,
this may be about the failure of the American dream, but so is us. So
Siskel on his video call, he said, "You're a journalist. Don't you like something about a journalist who has unlimited money?" You know, and I think one thing that they also had a problem with, because they had read the book, I had never read the book, the disillusioning of Hunter S. Thompson. They were like, he didn't do anything. And I was like, I mean, he wrote that book, so does it matter? He has lots of money, and I do not.
So
let's wrap this one up. What are we coming at?
I think they were jealous of journalists having a lot more fun than they were.
Yeah,
maybe. So
let's wrap it up. What are we filming?
With this in mind, let's give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. What do you think, guys? Personally,
Ken, are you doing middle again?
I want to do middle because I'm like 4 out of 10. I'm not gonna watch it again because after I've seen 20 minutes of it, I've seen the entire movie.
That's true.
Well, that was unfortunate. But let's move on to hopefully.
If I need to rewatch
pastures.
it, I'll rewatch the video for Backcountry by Avenged Sevenfold because that's 5 minutes long and I get a kick-ass solo.
So moving on to, as I said, hopefully greener pastures. The next movie was the choice that I made, which is the film that Ebert gave thumbs up to, but which Siskel did not. And as a quick aside before beginning our discussion about it. I have always considered the Siskel and Ebert television show to essentially be a time capsule of cinema, really. Like you can watch through any of their episodes from like the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, whenever, and there's always going to be these films that you have never heard of in your life. So then you look into it and you find out that it was like really well regarded, it maybe made a lot of money, or it starred like really big names such as Robert De Niro, but for one reason or another, it's kind of been forgotten by time. So when coming up with the idea for this episode, that was my entire kind of idea, was to have these films that I'd never seen of, never heard of. And with that, I came across Guilty by Suspicion. Guilty by Suspicion is, I think it was the 90s. 1991.
91?
Yes. Yeah. So Guilty by Suspicion is a 1991 thriller which stars Robert De Niro, and it is essentially about the Hollywood blacklist that came about in the 1950s, in which America and McCarthyism was really gunning to get rid of all those darn commies. And in doing so, there was a lot of people in Hollywood that, whether it be by association or whether any actual proof, they were essentially blacklisted from Hollywood, never allowed to work again, all because perhaps they went to a meeting like 30 years ago or whatever. And this film was by Irvin Winkler, who was around during that time, and he worked within Hollywood around that time on numerous productions. So I think it's really interesting going into this film. Not only is it a story that I think really deserves to be told, but it's a story that whenever Hollywood tries to tell it, it feels like it goes under the radar. Like there's this film, Guilty by Suspicion, which I put it to you guys, and I don't think any of you had ever heard of it. There's like the Jim Carrey movie, The Majestic, which is about the same thing. Never heard of that in my life.
There is the front from
I
Woody Allen.
Yeah, there's that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I only know about the Majestic, because I watched it at uni.
Cool.
It was one of those,
Very
it was one of those obscure ones put on in class.
But
my knowledge of the kind of the roundups and stuff is from hilariously studying 1950s sci-fi.
Yeah,
The kind of imitation. My third year, one of my projects, I labeled it the imitation narrative. So you've got body snatchers, and it came from another world, and the thing, which was essentially just a thinly veiled allegory for the threat of communism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the front stars Zero Mostel, who was involved in this stuff too.
Oh wow, I never knew that. That's very interesting. But yeah, so it's a pretty straight to the point drama, and simply put, it's about Robert De Niro's Hollywood director, who's he's like pretty big, but he's just about to have this like really big picture, which looks to be like this big deal, and then all of a sudden, they ask him to testify in court to name some communists, and from there, because he denies any association with the Communist Party, and because he refuses to give up any names, he is, not entirely, but he's essentially blacklisted from Hollywood, and it follows his downfall, essentially. Roger Ebert was a big fan of it, Gene Siskel less so, but Ebert thought that it was particularly knowledgeable about the time that it was representing, and because of that, he thought that it proved to be an incredibly interesting and incredibly tense kind of account of it, and it even used, as far as I'm aware, he said in his review on the show, he said the ending of the film, in which Robert De Niro testifies in court, it actually used some of Arthur Miller's own hearing transcripts, which I think is really interesting. Yeah, I think it's a shame that they disagreed on the film, because I was pretty blown away by it when I saw it. As I said, it feels to be this story that is constantly overlooked in Hollywood, and that people just seem to not have as much interest in the blacklist, which I think is a shame, because these people lost years of their lives and careers, and it deserves to be talked about, and they deserve to get some recognition.
I think the trouble is for Hollywood to talk about this would be to point fingers at themselves. Which is why it's so rarely done.
True.
Yeah,
but
I mean that final hearing scene is it's one of the most stressful kind of and frustrating kind of set pieces in movie history, isn't it? Because it's like he's standing up for what's right, but it's like unstoppable force, immovable object. He's not going to win, but all he can do is a bit like Rocky, he can leave with his dignity intact, not having named others. Because that's what it was about. It wasn't about like holding people's task for what they actually committed. It was like putting the screws on them enough so they'd turn in others who
I think
actually did have communist leanings. It's like.
I was honestly, I was pretty blown away by it when I saw it. And I think what I would say is, I think in terms of visual storytelling, I do think it's a little plain. I don't think it does much that's entirely unique or spectacular in the way it tells its story visually. But I think in terms of the screenplay and in terms of just showing this very human story, I think it's incredibly effective. And
it's formula, but it's well-made formula.
Precisely.
Is it kind of like a standard biopic style? Like that's
admittedly, in a way, I do think, because
I'm
it's
imagining
the 50s,
Beautiful Mind, but the 50s and no crazy people.
Because it's 1950s Hollywood, of course, it does look gorgeous. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just the way it is. But it doesn't feel. Speaking of like this time in Hollywood history, the Coen brothers, they did Hail Caesar, which feels like, whilst trying to satirize and trying to like make jabs at Hollywood for this horrible thing they did in the 1950s, they're also really celebratory of the golden age of Hollywood, which I
like Babylon.
I disagree. I love Babylon, but anyway,
Yes.
that's another that's another podcast episode. I think, yeah. So it kind of creates this imbalance in Hail Caesar. Whereas for this, I think they show it beautifully, but it never feels like it's exploiting anything. Instead, it keeps things pretty straight so that we focus on the characters and the story and everything that's going along. And yeah, I just think it's like those like little story beats are so well executed, like with Robert De Niro, like how he originally finds out that he is being punished for this. Like he like who is it? Was it Howard Hawks that no.
Howard Hawks is on the other end of the phone at one point.
Yeah,
but
pardon me.
the studio exec is Zanuck, isn't it?
That was it, Darryl F. Zanuck. He goes to Zanuck, and Zanuck says, "Oh yeah, you're going to get this great picture, but you need to go speak to these people." And then he doesn't, and then he comes back and he can't get an appointment with Zanuck, and then he goes to his lawyer. His lawyer tells him that he doesn't have the picture anymore, and like it's just like the ways in which he is unfairly treated. It's just horrible to watch Robert De Niro go through it. And the whole time he's so repressed in his emotion that it doesn't come out till the very end. And it really builds up to this like beautiful crescendo. I found it really impactful.
What I found interesting about it, which I wasn't expecting, was its use of like either renamed or kind of composite kind of characters, stand in for a lot of people who had the same experiences. So you have real figures, you have your Zanuck, you have references, to Marilyn Monroe and Howard Hawks and a few others. But you have the Scorsese character, De Niro's character, all these people generally kind of standing in for real people. I find it interesting that they didn't have people, playing people who were there and went through those experiences themselves, who named people. I mean, compare it to a similar story with a film like Trumbo, with Bryan Cranston.
Yeah.
Donald Trumbo, it was the writer to break the blacklist. When he got work again, when he got one of his scripts into production. Whenever in that is playing a real person and their real documented experiences, I don't know if it gave him a bit more freedom to kind of just have a more takes an artistic license and saying, yes, this specific situation might not have happened exactly this way, but it stands in for a lot of similar experiences for a lot of artists at the time, possibly.
Yeah, it's a decent, nice looking film. It's nothing extravagant, but I think it would actually be wrong to make it extravagant. It would be wrong. It's fairly muted. But that suits it. Sometimes you want a film to do something different and be new and flamboyant in a way, and sometimes you don't. And I think those films are the ones that get overlooked. It's the ones that do it right, but aren't kind of doing anything absolutely crazy or massively innovative. They just set out to do something very muted, very personal, very intimate, and pull it off.
I think it'd be wrong to kind of overly sensationalize a story, and when they even end on like like Card just saying, kind of just basically stating, so many people's lives are ruined by this, decade and a half, in Hollywood, and basically just it's almost asking kind of after that, what was the point of all that? It was just self-engineered kind of destruction, cultural, intellectual, political destruction, just out of this, chasing this phantom of, these reds under the beds, And
I also think actually that like a different director wouldn't have worked. Somebody with a slightly more extravagant directing style, even like a
Terry
Scorsese.
Gilliam.
No, but a perfect example. The choice of director for the subject material is something that also goes, under the radar as well. And I mean, this is Winkler's first directed film. But somebody like Scorsese is in it. Somebody like Scorsese. He's not massively extravagant sometimes. He does know how to mute it down, but he also does like his kind of quick-moving tracking shots, at times. There are kind of stylistic trademarks he likes to have a bit of flair. And I actually think that would be wrong for this picture. I'm not saying he wouldn't direct it well, because he would. but it would be a different tone, a different vibe, and I think it would actually derail the kind of. It's a more subdued picture because of the subject matter. Oh, hello, Ken. And the director has to be chosen and working accordingly to the material. And so again, somebody even Tarantino would be completely wrong. Even somebody like a Spielberg would be wrong. And I'm not saying these aren't great directors; they would just be wrong for the story.
Too stylized. That's Spielberg. Way too much style.
Well, Spielberg, I think, would find a way to overdo it, because that's what Spielberg does. He does big, flamboyant. He very rarely does small and intimate. Even something like Always still has its moments of
The Post
bombastity, if we want to say. Yeah. Again, something like The Post. We still have a human drama, slightly historical kind of thing going on, and the director's style just wouldn't have worked to this picture. And I think that's its strength, is that it doesn't try to do anything fancy. Nothing in here is fancy, but it works. I'm not saying it's absolutely fabulous in any way, but it does work.
I think that the trailer also, it is exactly that. Now that I've heard y'all talk about it, the trailer perfectly fits that movie. It's very standard early 90s kind of drama film, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this has really gotten me excited to watch this pretty standard 90s movie about a thing that happened in film history. That it very effectively shows that there's nothing flashy, nothing special, and that it's pretty dramatic and based on a true story.
Like, that's the thing, I think, because Siskel, his counter argument to Ebert was very much that he was like, I think your main thing about this film is that it's on the right side of history. He was kind of like, I think that you like this film more than it deserves simply because it is telling this story rather than doing anything flash with it. So for Siskel, the lack of flash didn't work, or perhaps, I don't know, perhaps he wanted more from it. Because I know he also said he didn't find the ending of the movie particularly stirring, which, I'll give it this. The end is a bit unconventional in that the way it builds the emotion and the way that it builds to this big moment, considering like spoilers, like in the ending, it's very much a case where
spoilers for history.
Well, yeah, true. He doesn't let anyone. He doesn't give away any names. He is like, you know what? I'm gonna stand my ground. I'm gonna hold my morals, and if it means my career, it means my career. Because the whole film that has been his position. It is this thing where it I can understand why for some it would maybe feel anticlimactic, but at the end of the day, it's similar to Rocky, as you said, Sam.
If you think this sounds climactic, then Rocky's anticlimactic, because Robert De Niro's character, he goes the distance. No, he doesn't win, but he definitely doesn't lose either. He leaves with his dignity intact.
I was hoping you meant he punched Joseph McCarthy, but
of course, Rocky really builds things up. I'm more just meaning that he goes in and you don't expect him to give it up, and he doesn't. But it is that thing where you're worried. You're like, oh, maybe he will. Like,
is there a scene where he trains to not talk? Like he learns to glue his lips closed, and he's chasing around lawyers.
Can we just say that the guy had done more than produce Rocky? Like, I know I can't name exactly off the top of my head what he's done, but I'll double check.
Irvin Winkler deserves a lot of respect.
Drinks raw eggs, so he throws up and can't testify.
Anyway, but yeah, so it's very much a case where, it really builds it up where he has really been put through the ringer, and we see him almost crack on multiple occasions, and we see people around him almost crack as well. Like his best friend Bunny, who's wonderfully played by George Wendt, we should add, and like he asks if he could testify and give his name. He asks if he can give De Niro's name in court because he's that desperate, and. That is such a great scene, actually. Let me just say. So George Wendt goes into De Niro's office and they have this whole conversation where they're talking about it privately. They're talking about like, hey man, I've been named. I need to name names, otherwise I'm going to go down. And they talk about it like and they're very protective of what they're saying, and they're very protective of like the volume of their conversation. But then after the conversation, Bunny leaves, and it pulls back, and we see that they were talking in front of a massive glass window in which all the people on the lot could see them. And I just think it was a really marvelous scene where, once again, it's not really flashy, but it's really small, subtle, and like even intimate ways that he shows what's going on in Hollywood, where everybody knows what's going on, but no one's speaking up, and everyone's keeping it very hush hush. It's marvelous, I think.
And I think if it was being made now, you'd have, with like the books being burned, somebody would put in like a Roger Deakins silhouette in front of all the books. It's a film where people will try and make these beautiful shots that are very poignant, that kind of tug at the heartstrings through their aesthetics and stuff like that. And this doesn't. And I actually think that's one of his benefits. Again, I can see Siskel going, it's just boring and formulaic, and it's like, yes, it's formula.
Yes. Why use the medium of film to express meaning? Darn.
No, Jacob, by any chance, did you not like this film? You seem very. You
didn't see it.
I didn't watch it.
You didn't watch it, dude. Why you're poking the bear so much on this one? What's up?
I told you beforehand I didn't.
So is your thumb rating going to be based on the trailer alone then?
Yes. And you guys talking about it.
I have to say, Jacob, I found it very amusing that you didn't watch the film, and you're like, oh god, yeah. Man, why make a movie? Like, what's up with that?
Oh, I meant the Roger Deakins,
right.
if they put a shadow over books being burned, heaven forbid.
And to be honest, there are a couple of shots where they've obviously like made an effort to think, oh, make this look like classic noir here, light cast from like shades, on a face or something. There's a few shots like that, but generally speaking, it's low key, and it's kind of letting the performances and the themes kind of carry through.
Yeah, there's not that many shots where you look at it and go, isn't that shot pretty? Is the point I was making. A lot of films now will try and do. Anyway, we should probably get on.
Maybe going back to silent film, but it's fine.
We should probably finish this off and get into Jacob's actual wheelhouse. Oh my god, it's a Scorsese movie.
I also didn't watch After Hours. Spoiler.
Hang on. There's a Scorsese movie, and you being the Scorsese fanboy.
So last week we went through all the Scorsese films me and Sam have not seen.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and I think there's probably half a dozen apiece. I think it's not
at least.
Many.
Not bad.
Okay. Anyway, what are we thumbing this?
Yeah. It's three for three.
I'm actually giving it a thumb. Yeah. It's like a 60, 65, but it's still a thumbs up.
Not bad. Yeah.
Probably about the same as
well,
Bob's,
3 and 1 for the trailer.
Hey, and you guys selling me on it.
Well, that's true. Thank you very much. I do.
But before this, I'd seen After Hours shortly before Mark gave us the idea for this episode. This is the only one of the three I hadn't seen at that point, and it was one I wasn't. I don't know whether I was expecting that much from it. Thinking I know what happened with the Blacklist-ish. It's a very well documented piece of history, but I was generally quite impressed by it, pleasantly surprised by it. So.
Yeah. But before we move on,
it's not astonishing, but I'll do a Sam and I'll give it a 6.
Before we do move on, I do want to say I feel bad because we weren't able to really say much about this film because it is one that really tackles its subject in such a way that isn't very glamorous, over the top. But I do want to say I personally love it and I do highly recommend it. It's an underrated gem. It did not make its money back at the box office. It's on Disney Plus right under our noses and we don't even realize. So if you have the means to watch it,
that's because we try not to give the money to the mouse.
Well, true, but I do highly recommend it. So in all sincerity, Guilty by Suspicion is great. If you're into that, I highly recommend it.
Yeah. And now from Scorsese acting to Scorsese directing,
Samuel
and Mark. This is 2 thumbs up, correct? That's what.
That it is, baby.
Cool.
2 thumbs up. Martin
Yeah,
Scorsese's After Hours.
of course, predictably, even on a film they agrees on, they still disagrees on it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But before I get into After Hours, I just want to I've just started reading. I know Mark's finished this wonderful book by Matt Singer about their relationship and their career together. Two thumbs up. Sorry, it's opposable thumbs, isn't it? Opposable thumbs. How Siskel and Ebert changed movies forever. But there are just a couple of choice quotes I just wanted to pull out from that, which kind of describe their dynamic on the screen, which made me smile. The two men were so at odds, even their hairstyles were diametrically opposed to each other. Because I think the one was as early paragraphs talks about how early on Siskel was making up for his male pattern baldness by growing this massive moustache, and Ebert never had a problem with this thick mop of hair and everything. But even better than that, he again talked about their just how they never. I mean, they're obviously a functioning professional relationship, but they're rivals as well. And he said, from the first time they made eyes on each other, Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel had known they had chemistry, the kind that causes glycerin to explode when it's mixed with nitric and sulfuric acids. And of course,
So
like
good.
that's why people like tuned into them. I think it was a lot of time. Yeah, people respect their opinions and everything. Want to hear about what what to talk about the new movies. But it became known that it may end up in a fight. And there was some quite well publicized rows between them. when their opinions differed. But it drew people in, and obviously got a lot of people to movies because of that. So interesting. So After Hours, it's a dark comedy that follows a disheartened office worker, Paul, played by Griffin Dunn from American Werewolf in London. It's funny, I didn't recognise him at first. I was thinking, Griffin Dunn, I know that name, and I know that face. Where have I seen him? And I was, oh yeah, he's not wearing zombie makeup in this.
10 points to Griffin Dunn. Okay, no. Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. So he's this office worker who's basically he's on the worst night of his life, stuck out in New York City streets. He travels to meet up with a girl in the Soho district, but on the way loses all his money. He loses the woman he's after, and he gets caught in the rain, gets trapped miles away from home, and eventually gets chased by an angry mob. It's just like a rapidly kind of escalating chain of events, essentially. It stars a very entertaining ensemble of eccentric character actors, playing all the night owl characters in this, including both of future Kevin McAllister's parents, Catherine O'Hara and John Hurd are both in this. Catherine O'Hara is absolutely terrifying, I must admit, as her character. She's one of the final kind of eccentrics that Paul meets on the night, and when she turns on him, oh boy, she's not one to be messed with. And John Hurd's like a sad sack kind of bar owner. But it's one of these. It's an interesting point in kind of Scorsese's career, this, because it's sandwiched right between like two big kind of star-driven kind of vehicles. So it was just after King of Comedy with De Niro, and just before Color of Money with Paul Newman. And basically he ends up doing this, for him, relatively small scale film, all shot on location and kind of done very quickly, basically just out of pure frustration at not being able to get either Last Temptation of Christ or Gangs of New York off the ground. They were the two big films he wanted to do next, and so he eventually got Last Temptation done later in the decade. But
what would 80s Gangs of New York look like?
So to do yeah, it would have been different, I'm sure. I mean, yeah. So he ended up this little movie kind of out of frustration, just almost like to get it out of the system, just to be working, basically, to kind of keep busy. And he never had the ending kind of quite mapped out, so he knew it was going to be almost like a series of vignettes, just Paul just making, just having one thing after another kind of happen to him, and just reeling from it, and then going on to the next thing and thinking, oh, it's going to be all right if I get home. Then something else goes wrong. It just keeps rolling like that. but he ends up consulting with a lot of his director friends, about what to actually do about the ending. So who does he consult with now? Just give me a sec. Where's it gone? I know that Michael Powell gave him the eventual ending he ends up with. So I think he exhausts with people like of Coppola and Spielberg, and I think Gilliam actually, funnily enough, and they all basically gave I've got this script, I know what I'm doing apart from this final stretch. I don't know how to end it, where this guy should end up. And I think in several versions, Paul ends up dying quite tragically. Spoiler, he doesn't in the final version. It's more a bittersweet ending than that. But I think most of them just said, yeah, it's a bit downbeat, really. We've had fun with this movie. It's tense and scary, but it's funny as well. It is a comedy at the end of the day, so let's not just have this guy get back home and immediately die. That might not be a good idea. So I couldn't find Siskel and Ebert's original review on YouTube, unfortunately, but I did find it mentioned in their yearly top 10 roundup. So it was a truncated version of their opinions, and Ebert said that nobody knows big American cities like Martin Scorsese, and few people know more about manipulating an audience. After Hours was basically a comedy, and yet the things that went wrong for that guy went so desperately wrong, and with such insane built-in logic that I felt a great deal of tension even while I was laughing. And Siskel largely agreed. He really enjoyed it. He thought it was a good film. It didn't make his top 10 though, but he did have to get in there that he thought that the film lost its hard New York edge at the end, and but basically it kind of the ending slightly ruined it for him. He thought it was a bit too. Maybe he would have been up for the bleak ending where Paul actually dies. Maybe that's what he's crying out for. He basically said that's his only criticism of the film. So they more or less agreed, but I think Ebert was more kind of rapturous in his praise. Ebert did do obviously had his original review when the film came out, but he also did a retrospective review a few years later, kind of house it as one of his kind of underrated Scorsese films that more people should have seen, basically, giving it a bit of love. And he said that the film's been described as dream logic, but it might as well be called screwball logic, because apart from the nightmarish and bizarre nature of his experiences, what happens to Paul is like what happened. It's like what happens to Buster Keaton, just one damn thing after another. And he mentions that it was all shot at night and on location, and they had to be quite creative about the use of their relatively low budget to achieve some of the shots. There's a famous shot of some keys being thrown down out of a window for Paul to catch, to let himself into an apartment building. But they really struggled to work that one out. They tried. At first, they tried fastening the camera to a plank of wood and basically dropping it on a bungee cord towards Griffin Dunn's face, which obviously could have gone very wrong. I mean, they're relying basically to step out of the way last minute. But they worked out that would just produce a quite out of focus kind of blurred image that wasn't very suitable. Not so much that you might kill the lead actor, but more the fact that it produces blurred footage, and we can't be having that. So the director of photography ends up doing something he fashioned like a crane basically, and it was like a zoom from a crane essentially. So it was. They kind of had to improvise, and kind of a lot of the scenes kind of just rolled on. It wasn't as such an improvised film, but I think the script was very much like a starting point for these character interactions, really. And I think Scorsese just let it run. If things were going an interesting way, or they're revealing some kind of truth about these kind of weird night owls, then he just let it run and kind of let it play out. I find it a really funny film. It is very dark as well. It's kind of got quite a mischievous, kind of bleak kind of sense of humour, and there is an amount of amusement, not just seeing when you think he's Paul's at it's like his lowest ebb, nothing else could possibly go wrong. Then they throw something else at him, and it's just just bills and bills. And I think it's one of those of Scorsese's that's not really talked about in general. I think it is one that probably deserves a bit more love. There's a very nice Criterion copy that's recently been released in the UK, which I would highly recommend because that's got a good interview of Scorsese looking back on it and like his experience, kind of how he kind of put it all together and why he did it the way he did. Yeah, I think it's definitely one worth a bit more love, and I'd say, I think it's interesting that this is one that Siskel and Ebert did almost see eye to eye on. I mean, I think they both appreciated Scorsese in general, but as not one of his bigger releases, it was probably nice at the time that maybe they could have said like to the viewers, this is this isn't one of his big gangster films or or anything like that. It's not got De Niro and it's not got mega stars in it, but it's worth your time. It's still worth a trip to the movies for.
I watched the trailer and had no idea what this movie was about. It kind of looked like a trailer for a David Lynch movie, is how I could describe it. Like, there's just characters and things happening that I don't understand.
Like I say, it's a series of vaguely linked vignettes. It's not a plotty film.
It's almost like a grounded surrealist odyssey through like New York, and there are some surrealist moments. The whole thing has no logic. There's I'm not going to say a Python-esque absurdity because it's not quite at the kind of old school Python level, but there's definitely an influence there of just these characters aren't real people. There is no attempt to make them like real people. It's just it's almost like linking up like really dark humor jokes, and then it just weaving them into kind of the main character trying to get home and stumbling from one joke into another, and eventually they all come after him again.
Yeah, and there's stuff I don't understand, and I don't really know what they were kind of going for, but that didn't necessarily ruin my enjoyment of the movie. You just kind of think you should get into that headspace and just go with it, and just kind of almost get into the mindset of like, I've not had enough sleep, I've been out for hours, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. It's like, it's probably the first, to get the authentic experience, you probably should watch it on not too much sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, I think, and kind of try and share it, kind of Paul's experience. I mean, like, the final act, is like, there's this metal club that he keeps going back to for various reasons throughout the night, and kind of
closer to hard punk. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right, you purist.
It's the hair.
That's
and
it.
The music. They literally play Bad Brains.
Okay, but then. And like I ends up there in the basement like this he ends up being cast, being put in like a plaster cast, like a head.
I'm sure Scorsese is trying to do some kind of metaphor papier-mâché, but I'm not quite sure what it is.
I love it because this is like one of Scorsese's most underrated films, and not that many people have seen it, and we have given away the entire fucking plot. But
there is none.
We've given away. You know
what?
There's not a like story throughout, but we have given away every single detail apparently. But I adored this film. It was quite funny because when we decided this was the idea we were going to run with for this episode, and we settled on the film, Sam said After Hours, and I was happy and annoyed at the time because I was like, God damn it, I was like, that Criterion is out, I can't really afford it, but like I kind of have to buy it now. And at the time we did think the episode would happen a lot earlier, which is partially on me as well, but it was one of those things I was like, God damn it. So I went ahead and bought it, and I saved it for last specifically because I'd heard so much about this film as a film fan. Like, even since I was a teenager, I I used to do this thing every Friday. I'd buy like a new DVD from like a local charity shop, and a lot of the times it was Scorsese because I was young and I was just watching through all of his stuff. And the one I could never get my hands on, but constantly heard of it was After Hours. Um, it just seemed to be this thing that for the longest time was unavailable in the UK. So when that Criterion dropped, I was really happy. And finally getting to it literally a few hours ago before recording this podcast. I think someone else said it. I didn't really know what to expect. I knew it was about a guy who has like a bad night, and that was it. And I just, from literally like, I think the opening frame, I was like absolutely hooked. I think the way that Scorsese sets up this world and sets up exactly what the character is about is absolutely masterful. Like literally just we see him typing away trying to train this new guy. His attention to this guy and the work that he's doing and the training he's getting is not very focused. The guy talks about how he doesn't want to be doing this his whole life. We see him look across the office. We see him looking at these people who practically live in the office. And just from there, right away, you know, you're like, this guy wants to escape from the monotony of his life. Like within seconds, we know exactly. And from there on, every single thing that happens throughout the night is reasonable. And it makes complete sense why he would keep doing this. And I just think it's absolutely perfect. And like, I won't lie, I didn't realize this was like a film between projects that he did. And it baffles me that this is a film that he kind of did on a whim, because I think it's up there with his best. I think it's fantastic.
I agree. I do wonder, I mean, not to open up old wounds again, but I do wonder if Terry Gilliam consulting on like the script ending, whether he was considered as director for this at one point, because you can sort of almost imagine what he'd have done with it, you know, with like his obsession with bureaucracy and stuff, you know, starting off with like the office drone and then going off on like a wild kind of adventure one night. You know, there are probably more surreal touches if Gilliam had done it, but
Scorsese was also considered for Fear and Loathing.
There you go.
Yeah.
You know what I would say? I don't want to open old wounds, but you know what I would say?
But you're going to.
Scorsese could make Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Terry Gilliam couldn't make After Hours.
Yeah, probably. Well, it would be a very different movie if he made After Hours.
It would be.
Like, he could make it, but he may as well not, because I don't think the end product would be very good.
There would be some dwarves and
I was going to say
things.
Scorsese's version of that was Wolf of Wall Street.
It feels like something on the lines of Fisher King, you know, which he did in the early 90s. You know, that's fairly low key as far as Gilliam.
True.
And again, it's like quite gritty New York set. You know, only occasional flights of fancy.
True, but yeah, honestly, I with this film, I went in and I really didn't know what to expect, and I was just blown away. I think. The cast of characters is so terrific because all of them are fairly low key. Like every single one of them you recognize almost immediately, and you're like, oh my god, like I know them, like because I've seen them in this. But like John Hurd, Catherine O'Hara, like it says a lot that Catherine O'Hara is probably the biggest name in this entire film. And yeah, it adds to the weirdness. It kind of adds to the uncanny valley of the whole film, where you're like, oh, I know them. I know them. This isn't the sort of character they would usually play. And I one thing I actually disagree with in Ebert's review, in his written review, pardon me. He says that it ends happily, which I disagree with. And I appreciate where he's coming from, because it's, once again, considering where it seems like the ending could go, this is relatively happy.
Relatively speaking.
Once again, we have discussed a lot of stuff from this film. And I do think if you are going to watch After Hours, do go in knowing as little as possible.
I mean, we've talked about a lot of stuff that's happened. There is stuff we haven't mentioned as well.
I know. I feel like we've given too much, to be honest. But anyway, with After Hours, but now that we have, I'm going to go into the ending. But the ending, he ends up right back where he started, at work. And he's in front of these like gorgeous gold gates, which kind of give a bit of a facade towards this like marvelous empire that he's going into, but in reality it's a prison. And yes, it ends happily, but he's going right back to the monotony of his life. And once again, considering how masterfully Scorsese sets that up, I think the way that he gets him back there, and the meaning we take from that, I think it's like devastating that he's back there. Like he's a changed guy, but in all the worst ways. Like he really put himself out there to make something out of his life, even if just a random little fling. And I really think this ending, like he's just going to go back to the monotony of his life and accept this dreadful, boring eternity of work for the rest of his life. And I loved it. It's so powerful. It's so like, I feel like it's not really the sort of film that you would watch and think, oh, it's beautiful. But I think, considering what it's talking about, yes, it takes it in a screwball manner. But like, considering the sort of things it's talking about in terms of like capitalism and like labor and stuff like that, it's really powerful. It's marvelous. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I describe it as one of the saddest happy endings out there for me. I think it's again, compared to what he's been through. It's kind of, he's probably grateful for a bit of normality again, but equally, he's not escaped from his humdrum life. He's not progressed. He's not gained anything from that. It's just all back at the beginning. But hey, at least Catherine O'Hara didn't kill with an ice cream van. So.
Like,
honestly, there are moments that feel a bit kind of Invasion of the Body Snatchers esque. Running away, people like searchlights going around. And,
it's funny because I feel like we've spoken about it a lot, and it makes me sad that there's things we won't get to discuss because obviously we only have so much time and we probably should wrap it up. But like, it makes me sad because I think it's a film that is like so rich with like context, with substance, and it's just, it's a film that I could talk about for hours. Frankly, I think we could have probably had an episode just about After Hours.
Mark, at least you're not like Siskel and Ebert, where you didn't have like a minute and a half to 2 minutes to get all of your thoughts in. Hey,
man,
we've come so far.
That's privilege for you, baby.
The privilege of unpaid film criticism.
Oh yeah, baby.
Take that,
We've got 6 years to get the payment in.
True.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, After Hours, an absolute masterpiece. I can understand why they gave it 2 thumbs up. I don't know about the rest of you, but as for me, it's getting a thumb up.
Mine is based off the.
Still on the.
Dude,
I mean,
right, dude. We're doing a Siskel and Ebert episode. There's no middle thumb. It's up or down. Why don't you understand that?
I don't care. I'm going for Ebert's 2 stars out of 4.
Did you
from that? I'll have to go for the up.
Good.
Yeah.
But you're angling it to the side.
Choice of that or that. It's a film that I watched and I got the kind of surrealism of it, but at the same time, I don't know whether it was just me or the time it was, where a lot of it just washed over, and I'm just going to remember it as just kind of a movie where stuff happened.
I cannot believe this.
Hey, Mark, it's your criticism of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas come back to bite you. Mwahaha.
This is...
Hey, man, I can take it. I can dish out.
To be honest, this is a kind of, like, less drug trippy version of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. In the kind of, a character starts off, loads of random stuff happens, and it ends.
Yeah, but this is a character we actually care about, and we actually like to follow, and the pacing's fantastic, and it's fucking hilarious.
Drugs are bad.
At the same time, I'm just there, like, okay. And I don't know, maybe it's because I've written stuff in the past where it's kind of like a surrealist odyssey kind of thing, where, in terms of like the vignettes, like they're just kind of like surrealist moments that try and affect it, and it's not like part of a massive plot. That I kind of, again, I come at it differently. I come at it from a writing point of view and almost a guttural feeling, rather than like a deep intellectual. I know there's stuff there because it's Scorsese, and he'll have a fit if he hasn't trying to espouse the nature of the human soul in some
How
way.
much steam coming up over New York streets is there? Quite a bit?
It all takes place at night.
There's a lot of steam.
Yeah. And yes, it's well shot and it's well acted and stuff like that, but at the same time, it didn't hit me.
Oh man, that's
on a
nuts.
personal kind of. I can appreciate it,
Yeah.
but I didn't connect. And
Yeah.
and I've said this before on episodes before that there are some films that I can appreciate as a film, but I don't connect to
That's
emotionally or gutturally.
like,
and at the same time, there are films that are genuinely not well made, and yet I can laugh my ass off or like
honestly,
enjoy.
Kieran, honestly, I appreciate that so much. Like, unfortunately, sometimes there are films that we watch and they just don't click. It happens.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You
Yeah,
can't help it. It's not.
To be honest,
So,
I mean, I've said it before, Scorsese is one of those directors for me. A lot of these kind of bigger directors are like that for me, in that I can appreciate Scorsese movies, but I don't gutturally react to Scorsese movies.
I can't believe this.
Like, in the nicest way, I probably will, unless I'm forced to, will never rewatch Raging Bull or like stuff like that. Even The Godfather, I hate to tell you.
Ken
just
what, Kieran?
don't.
Ken what, Kieran?
And on that
Sam,
bombshell,
pardon me.
Kieran,
Kieran, see if you said you were never going to watch Killers of the Flower Moon again. I'd be like, fair dues, I didn't really like it either. But that makes me so sad.
Okay, now we're
like,
fighting
I
again,
just
Mark.
don't
I
gutturally
appreciate- I-
connect with Scorsese. I appreciate that he's a very good director, but just
Like-
emotional connection to his movies, I just don't have them.
As I said, I get it, and I appreciate that you're saying that. I completely get it, because sometimes you just don't get the click, and you can't help it. Yes, you could try to point at things like this is wrong or this is right, so I should get this or I shouldn't get that. But like sometimes you just don't click, and that is the beginning, and that's the beginning and end of it, really.
Mark,
But
tell
I
him you
honestly-
didn't connect with Scream.
This is going to make me like, I won't lie, this is going to make me sound really patronizing, but I just feel so bad for you I just feel terrible that you don't.
he's sorry you feel that way.
Oh,
Again,
that's as a film fan, not clicking with Scorsese, that is really.
After Hours
the
is
poor
like
soul.
pretty much all of Scorsese movies that I appreciate the craft and I appreciate that it's a good film, but in the same way, time, I don't care.
Oh, you poor soul! I feel so terrible for you.
And so
if I
was to put it down in the review, I would say that it is a very well made movie. I'd praise everything like that. But at the same time, am I going to watch it again? Nah, not really.
Oh, what a
man.
In the
bombshell!
same way that I can listen to a piece of Mozart, and go, oh, it's a beautiful piece of music. But at the same time, I'm never going to note down exactly what it is.
But it's not Rammstein, is it?
It's no Avenged
Oh.
Sevenfold.
I'm learning that we're very different people.
And again,
Which is fine. To quote Seinfeld, as we did earlier, not that there's anything wrong with that.
Well, that's just like your opinion, man. And to end off with a different review, I remember Mark Kermode going, essentially that all films are subjective and reviews, your relationship is subjective. Therefore, at the end of the day, all film criticism is inevitably pointless.
Well, it's a cynical take, but whatever.
And that is the last episode of Second Cut, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
I mean, again, I said before, about 15 years ago, just as a final thing, that they did a poll of the most trusted film critics in the UK. And Mark Kermode won with about 4% of the vote.
He is my favorite critic. I do adore him. But yes, on final notes, thank you very much to Kieran, Sam, and Jacob for inviting me on the Second Cut Film Podcast. It's been a blast as always.
Of course.
But also,
he's not coming back.
very. I argue too much.
Kieran died.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to pick another hot button topic that you two can passionately disagree on.
But obviously at the end of the day, this entire episode wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Siskel and Ebert. So I do want to pay a little tribute to them. As I said, I'm not even entirely sure if I would be a film critic if it wasn't for Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. The way that they have shaped film criticism is insanely special to me and to many others. And I just think they deserve all the respect in the world. I fear that one day people won't remember them as well or as fondly. And I hope that
they'll only be remembered through the Bloodhound Gang. Bad touch.
They didn't have TikTok videos, so how would anyone remember them?
But yes,
Yeah.
so
That's how Scorsese's going to be remembered.
But yes, big love to Siskel and Ebert, and thank you to the Second Cut podcast for.
I was going to say we're ending this episode. The outro music is the Siskel and Ebert theme tune, right?
That'd be
No,
great.
because I don't want to get sued. Yeah, well, Mark, thank you for coming on and for like bringing so much to it. It's saving me from having to talk. I always love that. So it was
The
great.
question is, Mark, where can we find you?
Yes, thank
online?
you.
If you're looking to find me, the best place to find me would probably be on Twitter, also known as X these days.
No, it's not X.
not X.
Twitter.
Yeah, no one
Twitter.
cares. No one cares. It's not Prince. It's not formally known as. It's Twitter. Yeah, you can find me at Jurassic Mark on Twitter. That's the account where I post all of my film reviews and just film opinions. But generally, if you're looking anywhere else for me, just look up the name Mark Carnockin and you will find me.
Nice. And Sam, and then Kieran.
Yeah, as always, you can find me at SSP Thinks Film and at the Film Magazine.
Oh yes, and at the film magazine. Find me.
Yeah.
You
Get
read
that
anything
one.
recently, Sam?
I updated my Oscar-winning animated features list. There's going to be a lot of Oscar content going up on the site over the next few weeks. Obviously, in the lead up to it. So, yeah, I ranked all of the best animated feature winners. Since they brought it in 2001. So I've just added Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio to that to bring it up to date as of last year.
Yeah, we're obviously hoping that the Boy and the Heron wins, right? I haven't seen it, and I'm hoping that the Boy and the Heron wins.
I also haven't seen it, but I'll hope for you.
I mean, Spider-Verse, Across Spider-Verse was my film of the year, but I'm still hoping Boy and Heron wins Best Animated Feature because Spider-Verse already got a win for the first one, so give me a Zach another go.
Kieran?
Yeah, and hopefully you don't find me anywhere, but I'm Kate Judgmental across the various places, including TFM and bits. And the most recent bits I have up, I'm not sure if it was out when I did the last episode, but I've got one with the collaborations of Cary Grant and Alfred Hitchcock, and then I've got a 10 best moments from Blade Runner, because, oh my God, I'm discussing Blade Runner. Who would have thought? And then we'll have some bits and pieces coming up in the future.
Yeah, and you can find me at Jacob Film Guy, the film magazine, of course, and I don't know. I'm writing Scorsese stuff right now because Killers of Flower Moon is up for Oscars. So that's what's happening there. And you can also find us at Second Cut Podcast. Second Cut Pod, I think, is our social media stuff.
Go buy the merch.
Yeah, go to our Redbubble store
hoodie,
down in the
'cause obviously it's
description.
Melia.
New merch. I've got a new phone case now. That says Kurosawa in kanji.
And I've got a new
okay.
hoodie with Melier.
Yeah, so go buy stuff there, or you can still just give us money. It's not as much of it going to WordPress anymore or whatever, now that we are funded for 6 full years. Thank you so much to everyone who did that. You rock. Support independent film journalism. We like what we do, even if it is ultimately pointless, what isn't. So that's it. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Adios.
Goodbye.